Hello and welcome back to StoryTime with Eric Zimmer. I've read the foreword and preface of The Hidden Art of Disney's Musical Years, Volume 2 of Disney, How They Drew. They drew as they pleased. And before we get into the artists, there's a story about music here. Let's take a look. So you ready? Alright. Let's begin. Music, Maestro. Walt Disney was always experimenting. Throughout the 1930s, he toyed with story, animation, technology, and music. His first animated feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, was the culmination of those experiments. Though music was instrumental in the early successes of Mickey Mouse, and provided the lifeblood of the silly symphonies, it still awaited its coming of age at the Disney studio. Even as Snow White was being completed, Walt could feel the approach of greater musical complexities, like a force just outside his grasp. In July of 1937, he bought the rights to Paul Dukas' The Sorcerer's Apprentice music, which he initially planned to use as the basis for a new Mickey Mouse two-reel special of the same name. Through a fortuitous meeting with conductor Leopold Stokowski a few weeks later, during which Stokowski agreed to direct the music for the piece, the project eventually evolved into an ambitious new endeavor, the concert feature, better known today as Fantasia. Steve Martin was right. It was originally called the concert feature. The acquisition of The Sorcerer's Apprentice ushered in a new era at Disney, one in which part of Disney's story department was chiefly focused on musical projects. On July 6, 1937, the same month the deal with Paul Dukas was struck, Disney hired a 56-year-old musician, Heinrich Tandler, who soon became the studio's first music librarian. Like the studio's visual and reference library, the music library, which was part of Disney's music department, grew quickly and in all directions to serve the needs and requests of the studio's storymen and composers. By July of 1940, when an inventory of the library's Victoria records was drafted by Marcia Lees, who had succeeded Tandler, the list included hundreds of recordings ranging from classical music to circus music, congas, musicals, music of the world, Negro spirituals, tangos, and even nursery rhymes. Everything from Benny Goodman to Richard Wagner and more. Walt never did things halfway. By February of 1938, with the cost of the Sorcerer's Apprentice rising at an alarming pace, he was already considering the idea of converting the quote-unquote featurette into a section of a full-length feature. Disney may have had the concert feature idea in mind when later that month he and studio composer Larry Harline met with Russian composer Sergei Prokofiev and his lawyer Randolph Polk, and listened to Prokofiev play the piano score of Peter and the Wolf. During the visit, Polk recalled 2 years later, Prokofiev explained that he had written this composition with Mr. Disney in mind, and that it was his one great desire to have Mr. Disney acquire this work for use in one of his feature pictures. Though the music was not used in the concert feature, in 1946, Peter and the Wolf was included in Make My Music. Classical Dreams. By September of 1938, Walt and his team, along with Leopold Stokowski, were listening to dozens of classical records to select the musical sequences that would be part of Fantasia. Surprisingly, it only took them a few days to focus on some of the pieces that would actually make it into the film, including the Toccata and Fugue, the Nutcracker Suite, Night on Bald Mountain, and Ave Maria. It took them a while longer to decide which of the initial selections would be discarded and how to organize all the elements to give the right balance to the on-screen quote-unquote concert. One of the men who attended the Fantasia story conferences was music orchestrator Edward Plum. Edward had been hired in March of 1937 on the advice of the head of Disney's Story Research Department, John Rose, who had studied with him at Dartmouth. Ed Plumb was really the musical genius behind Fantasia, explained Rose. He was capable of taking the original Mussorgsky sketch for Night on Bald Mountain and to go ahead and orchestrate it the way he felt Mussorgsky would have done it had he lived to do it himself. Without Plumb, I doubt that we would have gotten into Fantasia. Even more so than conductor Leopold Stokowski, Ed Plumb became the soul of the Fantasia project and its unsung hero. Where was it? With the right team in place and with a whole full-length feature to play with, Walt gave free rein to his imagination, suggesting a dream of Rube Goldberg's as the visual representation for Moto Perpetuo, or the devil playing his organ for the spirits to the music of Night on Bald Mountain. Some of Walt's wildest ideas came in the form of intriguing technical suggestions that would stimulate the audience's senses. For the Nutcracker Suite, he contemplated using atmospheric fans to waft perfume into the theater. For The Sorcerer's Apprentice, he considered the peppy aroma of gunpowder. He even envisioned a pantopic projector that would project all around the cinema. Disney was also toying with the concept of 3D projection at that time, which, due to the limits of the technology, would have had to be in black and white, and therefore would have been limited to a small section of the movie. I thought if we used this, we'd have it at the top of the program, explained Walt to Stokowski, and have the glasses attached to the program. Black and white might be more valuable than color in our case. Stokowski agreed. It would be a rest from the color. Another experimental idea that excited Walt in those early Fantasia story meetings was that of sound surrounding you in the theater. We know it today as stereophonic sound, but the concept was brand new at the time. The studio called it Fantasound, and it took the technical genius of one of Walt's best engineers, Bill Garrity, working with RCA to make it a reality. Walt and his brother Roy were so enthralled by the new invention that they decided that they might even use it for Bambi. But it was not to be, as the system proved too costly to install in many theaters across the United States and ended up hampering the mass market launch of Fantasia. Future Fantasias. Walt loved Fantasia so much that even before the movie premiered on November 13, 1940, he was already exploring potential encores. In April of 1940, he sent music arranger Herb Perry around the studio to interview story artists, animators, and directors and get them to brainstorm about future Fantasias. Why stick purely to classical music? Asked some of the artists. Could we do a concert feature showing the structure of music from the primitive beat in the jungle? Suggested storyman Thornton He, aka Tee-Hee. Going to the development of music among the early peasant people, there must be pieces written along that line, and finally bringing it up to the Negro spirituals, including the sort of things that the great directors use in their concerts at Carnegie Hall, symphonies, or opera. A month later, on May 14th, a seminal story meeting about the future concert feature took place at the studio. Stokowski, Walt, and his artists toyed with dozens of musical ideas, from Rossini's Barber of Seville to George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, and from Peter and the Wolf to Sibelius's Swan of Tuonela. Walt was so serious about these plans that the following year, on February 14, 1941, the internal studio newsletter ran the following article. Nimbus-haired Leopold Stokowski, behind locked doors on the live-action stage this Sunday night, February 16, 1941, will conduct a pre-selected symphony orchestra while studio recorders hum. Prokofiev's Peter and the Wolf, Sibelius's Swan of Tuonela, and Rimsky Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee will be recorded. These sections are tentatively listed as future alternates or encores for Fantasia. During the week, studio carpenters sawed and hammered, erected in 3 days a plywood orchestra shell which RCA technicians declared to be acoustically perfect. 15 orchestra stands of varying height were also built to facilitate placement of instrument choirs. The music was recorded, but by early 1941 it was becoming clear to all at the studio that Fantasia, Walt's ambitious dream, had not managed to find its audience and was a box office disappointment. The commercial failure of the movie and the hardships brought by World War II killed plans for an encore. I mean, they did make a sequel. We all know they did make a sequel years later in 1999 called Fantasia 2000, but that's another story, and I think it will be covered in one of these later volumes. Anyways, Swing Time. It was not just classical music that stimulated Walt's imagination in the early 1940s. He was also inspired by the rhythms of swing and popular music. While working on the 1941 picture The Reluctant Dragon, Disney story artists had suggested a sequence towards the end of the movie involving Robert Benchley meeting Benny Goodman and his band, and as outlined in a memo by director Norman Ferguson. We open with a terrific blast of the Sing 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 music, but we are on a close-up of the end of the clarinet. As we truck back, we disclose that the clarinet is being played by Benny Goodman. Keep on trucking back, disclosing the bull fiddler beating the stuffing out of the fiddle, the drummer drumming away, and the trombonist tromboning, showing the whole band setup of Goodman in Coconut Grove, photographed in beautiful 3-color Technicolor live action. All this is done by actual color photography of Benny Goodman and real dancers. Cut to dancers and follow 2 characters to a corner. And at the hesitation of the music, and the afterbeat of the cymbal carrying the melody pauses, the dancers cross-dissolve into their prototypes of animals. Seeing a hippo and a giraffe, who immediately resume the dancing in this actual live-action setting. Cut to another couple, definite types, and they cross-dissolve into a rhinoceros and an elephant. Another couple cross-dissolves into an alligator and a hyena. Cut to a Brenda Fraser-type girl dancing with a gangster-type fellow, and they cross-dissolve into a black panther and a gorilla. These animals all retain human costumes, but of animal feet, arms, heads, and structure. Interesting.